The webinar for today is titled Career Conversations for Large and Small Groups, and we're happy to be joined by our presenter today, Megan Shea. Unfortunately, Jen Curry is not able to join us, but we're happy to be joined by Megan. Megan, go ahead.
Hi, everyone. I'm Megan Shea. I'm an assistant professor of school counseling at New York Institute of Technology. My colleague Jen Curry is at Louisiana State University, and unfortunately she's not able to be here, as Jen just mentioned, but she was a developer in not only these webinars, but also in the career conversations along with me. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. I do want to make you aware, if you have not joined one of these webinars before, you'll see that there's 4 handouts on your GoToWebinar screen there. And I'm going to ask you to kind of look at some of those along the way. I included the mindsets and behaviors for those of you who are not very familiar with it, but I know some of you may be very familiar and you won't need to look at them. But as you kind of go along, it might be really helpful for you to check out the career conversations for middle school students and the career conversations for high school students, depending on your level, just so that you can kind of familiarize yourself with the information. There's a lot of information there. So for today, the learning outcomes are to identify the theoretical foundations of the ASCA career conversations, apply the ASCA career conversations to small and large group case studies based on the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, develop an objective based on the ASCA mindsets and behaviors, and identify an ASCA career conversations intervention. And lastly, identify ways to use ASCA career conversations in meetings for small and large groups. So the types of groups that you can use the career conversations for include small student groups, so meaning 6 to 8, usually psychoeducational groups in a school setting, in classroom guidance sessions, in parent workshops, faculty and staff presentations, and community member discussions. Today, we're going to be primarily focusing on small student groups and classroom guidance as a way to use the career conversations. But we have done previous webinars in this series that address parents, and we have an upcoming webinar that'll go over how to use this for community members. So first of all, we wanted to find out what level you're at. So we just wanted to get a little poll of who's with us today. If you could just select one of the following in the polls, that would be great.
All right, the poll's open. We do have some responses coming in. We're looking at about 10% elementary, 17 middle, 50% high, and 23% multi-level.
Perfect, thank you. So we have not developed career conversations for the elementary level, but I think that if you use the middle school ones, you'll probably be able to see some strategies for questions that you could easily use in elementary or modify them to fit the elementary level. So real quickly, I wanted to talk a little bit about common misconceptions of career development and college readiness. It seems like a lot of the rhetoric in schools and with politicians, it's a lot around college readiness and also amongst school board members. but it seems to be missing the piece around career development, much of that conversation. So I just wanted to go over a couple thoughts here. So a misconception around career development is the mostly secondary and post-secondary, and I'm sure that many of you have probably experienced that. In some schools I've come across don't even really start addressing career development or college readiness when somebody's a junior or senior in high school. So hopefully that's not the case in your district, but especially in districts that don't have elementary counselors, it becomes very challenging, because so then everything gets crunched into the high school level. And as you know, probably a lot of people outside of school counseling don't understand that career development really begins before kindergarten. There's also a misconception that there's not a lot of literature and theory that applies to young people around career development. So meaning that you know, most of it is starting in high school and then beyond. But there's actually, we do have quite a bit of information for people who are as young as elementary and even prior to that. Lastly, it's that it's an isolated concept. So meaning career development, and I don't know if you remember the old standards, the national ASCA national standards had the 3 domains kind of sectioned out, career development, academic, and social and emotional. But for those of you who have been doing career development, you know that all of those pieces really intersect. So it's nice and easy to sort of think about it in 3 domains. That makes it easy for people to understand, but they really do intersect with each other, all of those pieces. So as we developed the career conversations based on the mindsets and behaviors, we really tried to address all of those domains, not just career development. And in college readiness, it only focuses on college planning and happens once again in high school. So we have another poll for you, if you wouldn't mind doing this one. On a scale of 1 to 5, how well do you engage groups of students in career development? So 1 being, you know, you're not feeling like you're really doing much at all, and 5 meaning you are super awesome at it. If you could go ahead and just rate yourself and how you feel you and your program are doing.
Okay, so we have most people have voted. Looks like about 12% are saying 1, 31% saying 2, 40% 3, and 17% 4, and no one is saying 5.
Okay, sounds like everybody feels like they have a little room for improvement no matter where you're at. So it sounds like 3 is sort of the average. I would have probably placed myself in that category as well. One thing that we did in my district, we ended up having, by the time I left, we were doing a lot of career development and advisory sessions, which was nice because then it wasn't just the school counselors who were doing career development and academic reading or development as well. In those advisory sessions, it was actually being taught by teachers. So a couple times a week, students would get, all students in our building would be getting this this information, which culminated in a student-led conference. So students would share all the information that they learned about themselves in student-led conferences. So that was a really nice way to do it. Prior to having that system in place, though, in our district, I would kind of piecemeal things. So I tried to find evidence-based programs, and there weren't a lot of things out there. One of the things that I found was put out, it was called The Real Game. I don't know if any of you have heard about that one, but it's this really great curriculum, very interactive, and they have an elementary and a middle school, and I think they even have a high school one as well. where students kind of develop their own communities in terms of career type communities within their classrooms, and they go through a whole series of activities and that kind of thing. The really hard thing for me about that kind of a curriculum is that this one in particular for middle school was 17 lessons. And for me in my building, that was a tough one. So I found myself having to pick and choose what I felt was the most important thing. And then I don't know if I'm picking and choosing pieces, if it's actually evidence-based or not. I'm just trying to give them the best that I can do. So that's kind of how I handled things. I think that one of the things that's nice about these career conversations is it really allows you to really kind of target whatever your issues are and then build from there, so that you aren't doing, not necessarily needing to do everything. You can really kind of target your interventions based on what the student needs are in your building. If you wouldn't mind using the text box, it would be great if you could briefly describe a career development activity that you're currently addressing, or something that you're doing in your building already, or something that you would like to do for groups of students in your school. If you wouldn't mind just typing that in, that would be great, so that we have an idea of what people are up to.
And you can type those answers into the questions section of that GoToWebinar panel on the right-hand side of your screen. We'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. In the meantime, we did have a question. Can you repeat what that program for the middle and elementary was with the 17 lessons, Megan?
Yep, it's called The Real Game.
The Real Game, okay. Thank you.
I believe it was developed, I actually learned about it from CSCORE, the Center for School Counseling Outcome Research and Evaluation. And so that was one of the few evidence-based curriculums that I learned about from them. And I believe, I'm trying to think back to it, but I believe it was developed in Canada. And what they did was they took a lot of business professionals and of like some major companies, along with some career specialists, and they developed this curriculum based on what the needs are of business professionals.
Got it. All right, we do have some questions or some responses to this question coming in. I do a unit of high school and options after high school. We do a scholarship night, and we just did our first career day.
Great.
We have career acquisition and entrepreneurship. I would like to do more career development sessions for students each year. Currently doing classroom lessons on career clusters and interest profilers in freshman and sophomore classes.
Okay.
We review career options through skills and interests that the students have for the high school process. Career cafes for 8th grade with professionals who are alumni of our school. Large group lessons for 9th graders. Would love to create a workshop for group or for juniors and seniors that are undecided on a career path.
Right.
Providing 2 workshops on all about the trades for high school students to focus on careers in trade, vocational training, opportunities, and apprenticeships. Career chats where parent volunteers are coming in to speak about their jobs and the education and training required.
Nice.
Wow, we have just so many responses coming in.
That's good.
Digital citizenship while using technology for job search. I'm in elementary and using a TED Talk about the topic of multi-potential light to explore many careers and what skills they need. I try to cover a variety of careers to reach everyone. So, yep, I think a great variety of responses here.
That's great. So as I kind of pointed out before, it's unfortunate if students get to high school and we're trying to cram everything in there because they've missed all this opportunity to be building on these skills, and they're learning things about career whether we teach them or not. So what we want to make sure is that we're teaching them so that they're learning the correct material. So for example, in elementary school, students are learning biases, who can go into what types of careers, are there gender roles going on, are there specific issues related to race and who qualifies for what particular type of job. So those are very clear kinds of examples that can be addressed in elementary school. And if it hasn't been addressed in elementary school, then maybe those preconceived biases that they might have then needs to be addressed in middle school or high school. So one of the pieces that I have found personally really interesting is the NCDA, the National Career Development Association, has a policy statement about, and what they do in this policy statement, you can find this on their website. So it's the National Career Development Association again. Again, it's their policy statement. What it does is it breaks down for you what students should be learning at each kind of stage in career development. It actually goes pre-K all the way through retirement, which is the neat thing about their policy statement. So if you just kind of need a refresher on what students should be learning at each stage, this is kind of a good beginning point. There's a lot of information so that you can get a lot more in depth and learn a lot more of it, but this is a nice little kind of starting piece if you'd like to check that out. So I am not sure how familiar all of you are with the mindsets and behaviors. I'm assuming if you're a member of ASCA, you're fairly familiar, so I don't want to spend very much time on this. But essentially what it is, it's a framework for identifying the mindsets, attitudes, and thoughts and behaviors that P12 students need to develop in personal, social, career, and academic domains. So the question that I'd like to ask you to sort of reflect on personally is, if you are familiar with them, do you feel like you are applying them? So for me, one of the things that I found challenging is what I tried to do is I would try to apply a whole bunch of them to what I was doing. For me, what it did was it sort of watered down everything that I was doing in my program, because I was trying to kind of shove in so many mindsets and behaviors, rather than really kind of going in depth and doing any real work on any of them in particular. So I'll give you a couple of examples. We'll walk through some vignettes today that will help you maybe kind of figure out how to go really kind of more in depth with the mindsets and behaviors and address particular needs in your building. So one thing that is important to Jen Curry and I is that you understand that we didn't just develop these career conversations based on what our own personal ideas are. We wanted you to know that what we did, there's a background to the conversations, that we based it on theory, research, and we just wanted you to be a bit familiar with that. So one of the pieces that we took into account Bronfenbrenner, which is the ecological systems theory. So essentially what Bronfenbrenner, this is kind of a quick little snapshot, he talks about a microsystem where there's interaction with the immediate surroundings that a person has. A mesosystem, this is where a person makes connections between the microsystem. So each different category. An exosystem, which is the social settings and support the person more globally. A macro system, which includes cultural values, laws, customs, and resources. A chronosystem, which includes time dimensions and how they affect the individual. Next, we looked at Bordeaux, and he talks about capital. And when we're talking about capital, we're talking about issues such as economics, cultural, social, and symbolic types of capital. We also took into account counseling theories such as solution-focused, narrative, motivational, and motivational interviewing. So you'll see that most of the questions, if you are taking a look at them in the handouts, you'll see that most of the questions are really kind of more of a strength-based kind of perspective. And so that's how most of our questions are worded. We also looked at career development theory and included these concepts: Super's lifespan, life space theory, social learning theory, and constructivist theory. So we have career conversation premises. So the career conversations were developed to give you sort of a jumping point and ideas about what types of questions can go with each mindset and behavior. So if you wouldn't mind pulling up for yourself either the middle school or the high school career conversations, it will probably help you to be looking at that as I'm walking through this. So you're all professionals, and Jen and I don't presume to know exactly your style, the way you ask questions, but we're giving you ideas for questions that can be asked in each category. So you may want to ask the questions exactly as we have written them, or they might just give you ideas about other questions that you may want to ask. Of course, you may want to reward them. So it really takes into account that you need to use your professional judgment as you're working with individual students or groups of students as to what fits your style and also what is most relevant for the situation. So the first career premise is that all students have the opportunity to explore interests, abilities, values, and goals with a certified school counselor. Second, all students have the freedom of post-secondary training and career choice. Third, career development engages students, parents, and community partners. You'll see as you're looking at the career conversations page that on the left-hand side, you'll see the mindsets and behaviors. At the top of the page, you'll see different columns. One is for parents, one's for community members, and one's for students. So today we're going to be primarily focusing on that last column that is the student column. As I mentioned before, we did a previous webinar on engaging parents, and in a week or so we'll be doing another webinar for community members. Career development is a lifelong process beginning at pre-K. Students have the right to change their career aspirations and goals at any times, and career conversations are primarily strength-based. So when we walk through these, the first thing that you'll do is you'll determine the mindset and behavior based on the student's needs. So in this situation, we'll be talking about, what are the needs of your building? What do some of your students need in terms of small group training? Who needs more training for a small group? And what types of training does your school building need in terms of whole school information? So what do your students need that your administration agrees with and your teachers think are important, and what do you just know students need? And this might include you needing to do a needs assessment. It could be a needs assessment based on the mindsets and behaviors to determine what students already know, what missing pieces do they have. So after you determine the mindset and behavior based on the student needs, you'll then find the corresponding questions for the students, parents, or community members, depending on who you're working with. And you'll determine which questions are relevant for the situation. So here's our first vignette. Mr. Anderson is an 11th grade high school counselor at a low SES high school with 95% free and reduced lunch. It's highly diverse with 40% African American, 30% Hispanic, 15% Asian American, 10% white non-Hispanic, and 5% multiracial. Mr. Anderson is working on developing a financial literacy unit for students to promote post-secondary application and admission. Prior to implementing the unit, he wants to learn more about what students and parents already know. His plan is to have 3 classroom presentations and a parent workshop. Mr. Anderson is particularly interested in how much students already know about financial literacy technologies, like online resources, that may assist them in learning about loans, grants, and other types of student aid, like work study, as well as how to estimate costs. He's also interested in whether students have access to computers at home to navigate these resources with their parents. So after reading this vignette, what do you think are the main issues that Mr. Anderson might address in a needs assessment? If you wouldn't mind typing that in, that would be great. And let me know if you need me to go back to the previous slide.
Again, you would want to type that into the questions section of the GoToWebinar panel on the right. All right, we have some questions coming in, or some responses coming in. Do students have access to computer and internet at home? Another one of those. We did have a request to go back to the previous slide. And then students' access to technology at home, again. What websites have you explored for continuing education or careers?
Yep.
Pre-post questions. Have the students filled out an application before?
Great.
What do they already know about financial opportunities for college?
Great.
All right, and that's what we have.
Perfect, thank you. So if you ask an open-ended question in kind of a group format, you're going to get some really great responses, but it will also be much more difficult for you to look through and sort and kind of evaluate those responses. So it's kind of up to you. Do you want to ask open-ended questions like that in terms of, so that it will take you more time to go through and score them? Or would you prefer to ask questions like, do they have technology skills to navigate College Board, College Navigator, etc.? So you could ask specific questions around if there are certain websites that you want to make sure that they have looked at, you might want to ask about those specifically. Let's see. Do they have the financial literacy skills to navigate these sites is something that you would want to know. So kind of looking at asking specific questions about that might be helpful to you. Okay, so next what I'm going to ask you to do is take a look at your, let's see, and we're looking at the high school version right now. So if you don't already have the high school career conversations pulled up, I want you to take a look at that and just sort of peruse try to pick out one of the mindsets and behaviors. Again, they're on the left-hand side. What do you think might fit this situation? Which mindset and behavior might you want to address?
Self-confidence and ability to succeed. Understands that post-secondary education and lifelong learning are necessary for long-term career success.
Great.
Demonstrate critical thinking skills to make informed decisions.
Great. So you can see that using the mindsets and behaviors, you could actually pick many of them for every different type of vignette or situation that you have. What we chose was apply media and technology skills. So here are the different questions that go with applied media and technology skills in the career conversations. So if you look on your sheet there, see apply media and technology skills, go to the right-hand side. These are the questions that you'll see correspond. So what you do now is look at these questions. Do you feel that these are good questions that you may be able to use in this situation with your classroom? So what types of technology and software do you use regularly? How do you use it? How can these technologies assist you in your future career? Can you think of some STEM careers that are related to your hobbies and interests? Are there any STEM careers you would like to know more about? Again, these are meant to be sort of a starting point for you, or you may want to just use them as is. And as we've written these, just so you know, they can be used with individual students, obviously, or with groups of students. Today we're focusing on the groups. So here are the ones that we wanted to add to this and decide on. We wanted to decide that these are the ones we want to go with. Do you have internet access at home? Can we assist you in finding a convenient location for your child to access the internet for academic purposes? So in this case, Mr. Anderson also wanted to do a parent workshop. So these are the ones that would go with the parent workshop piece of it. So based on this vignette, what should Mr. Anderson's students know and be able to do as a result of his intervention? So if you refer back to the mindset and behavior that you chose or that we chose, what is it that you would want students to know and be able to do? And in this case, what we chose again was apply technology skills. So here's a couple of example objectives that we came up for Mr. Anderson's 11th grade students. 80% of students will define what constitutes college value. And by that we mean student retention, matriculation, enrollment, tuition, fees. And 96% of students participating in this unit will identify 3 websites that may be used to calculate college costs. So as you can see, what we're doing here is we're wanting you to develop specific objectives so that it makes it easy for you to know if the students actually meet that target. Is your intervention actually working? And the way that you do that is by developing a specific objective for students, so that you're able to easily measure it. By developing these objectives, now it's easy for you to say, okay, well, are 80% of students doing this? Are 90% of students doing this? Because it makes it a little bit easier for you to develop the way that you're going to be measuring it. Okay, here's our next vignette. Mrs. Reed is a middle school counselor. There is a great deal of pressure from her school board for students to be career and college ready. One way the board measures the school's success is by how many students attend a 4-year college. Right now, the college-going rate for her school is 65%. Mrs. Reed's principal would like to focus on engagement in extracurricular activities because she believes it leads to higher grades and lower dropout rates. She is also aware of evidence indicating engagement in extracurricular activities is an indicator for college success. Right now, 51% of the students are involved in middle school related extracurricular activities. Mrs. Reed would like to increase engagement in extracurricular activities. And by the way, these scenarios are actually real scenarios of when Jen and I are working with school districts. This is a current one that I've been working on with somebody. So this is something that they're real things. So hopefully they ring a little bit true for your district, or you'll know of districts that have similar types of issues maybe. So I just wanted you to kind of think about, why might some students not sign up for extracurricular activities? If you wouldn't mind putting that in the questions polling section, that would be great. Not polling section, but in the text box. Why might some of these students not be signing up for extracurricular activities, just based on your own experience?
Lack of interest or lack of parental transportation, not good at sports, not knowing about them, or not having the financial resources. Anxiety about abilities and skills. They have to work. Transportation issues. Location of the school and time to get home. Have to babysit younger siblings. Embarrassed to ask for help. That's pretty much the scope of what we're getting.
Perfect. Those were all reasons that I came up with. I didn't think of the anxiety, but that's a really good one too. So what do you think about doing a needs assessment? A needs assessment, would it be helpful? Would Mrs. Reed, would it benefit her to do a needs assessment to determine what is preventing students from signing up? If so, what could Mrs. Reed ask? You all originally came up with some really great reasons for why students may not be participating. Here's a couple of the questions that I thought of in terms of doing a needs assessment. Do you need the school to provide transportation in order to participate? Do you have after-school obligations that make it hard to participate? Do we offer activities that you're interested in? If so, what? If not, what would you like to see? Are you involved in community extracurricular activities? So it may be that some students are doing some great activities outside of school, but we just don't know about it in this case. So finding out if students are involved in other great things would constitute as being involved in extracurricular activities. So that would be a really helpful piece of information. So, step one, determining the mindset and behavior. You all may, as you're looking at the middle school career conversations, come up with something different. But here's a couple that I thought were a good fit. Participate in enrichment and extracurricular activities, and sense of belonging in the school environment. So here's some possible questions that would go along with participate in enrichment and extracurricular activities. And again, these are the corresponding career conversations questions that go with that mindset and behavior. What kinds of things do you enjoy doing after school, on weekends, and in the summer? And what types of activities would you like to be involved? How might participating in these kinds of activities prepare you for your life after high school? I really like that last question because it helps make the connection between being involved in extracurricular activities and how it matters to their life, like on a larger scale. So sometimes we don't help students like actually make those connections. You all may be able to come up with other questions that would help make those connections, going beyond how might participating in these activities prepare you. So the next one that I chose here under sense of belonging at school, the career conversations questions are, tell me about the activities you are involved in during the school day and after school. What is your favorite part of the school day? If you had to rate your school on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being terrible, 10 being amazing, how would you rate it? Why? What would it take your school to be amazing? So based on those, what should Mrs. Reed's students know and be able to do as a result of her intervention? What do you think she should want them to know and be able to do? And remember, we're basing these on the two mindsets and behaviors. One is sense of belonging in the school environment, and the other one is participate in enrichment and extracurricular activities. What would you like those students to know and be able to do? If you could type that into the text box, that would be great.
All right, come up with an action plan. Know the difference between enrichment and extracurricular activities and future careers.
Great.
Find activities that match your goals and their interests.
Okay, great.
That's all that's coming in so far.
Okay. So here's a couple of examples. 80% of students in grade 6 through 8 will participate in outside or inside school extracurricular activities. So originally, I think the number was around 52% are currently engaged in an extracurricular activity, but that was actually just measuring in-school activities. So if we change that to either they're engaged outside or inside, because the school may not offer or be able to offer all of things that all students would be interested in. So I felt that 80% was probably a realistic number. I kind of wavered between 75 and 80%, but I thought 80% was probably a realistic number for us to be able to hit. And also, students will report increased school connection based on a survey. This is a measurement tool that measured psychological sense of school membership. And I put the author and the name of the measurement tool just in case you're curious about it and want to look it up. It's a free measurement tool, and it has good reliability and validity rates. In fact, Jen, I could send that over to you, and you could send that out to people if anybody is curious about wanting to see that.
Sure.
So in the end, and you'll see sort of the depth of this, I was a little concerned about it being so extensive, but then as I talked earlier, I was talking about this is more of a depth thing, really kind of going in depth and trying to make sure that you're doing something really well for students versus just hitting a bunch of little pieces and not really knowing if you're doing a nice job. So as you look through this, you'll probably see that there's an RTI component to it, response to intervention, where the idea is that all students get some information. Some students will get even more information, meaning in small groups, and you may have a few students that you then need to meet with one-on-one who need even more. So as part of her plan, she's first going to develop a needs assessment to determine who and why some students are not in activities. She can coordinate with the student leadership to speak to each classroom about extracurricular activities. I know some of you mentioned that maybe students aren't aware of some of the activities going on in the school, some of the options, and this way it would be more of a student connection, explaining what happens, why they like certain activities. So that would be for all students. You can apply some of those career conversation questions for all students going into all classrooms. Then after you determine who is not actually in an extracurricular activity, you might want to meet with those students in larger groups. So that will kind of depend on your building. In my case, it would have been easy for me to meet in the media center and just do large groups there, bring down groups of students who are not already in an extracurricular activity, and again, apply more career conversation questions here. This would also be the point where I'd want to do a pre-test. That pre-test that I mentioned before about measuring their sense of school membership, which is really kind of a school engagement type survey. And that is a nice, easy one because it could be done electronically. Then you may still have a few students who have not grasped it, or whatever reason they're experiencing barriers and are still not involved in any activities. So you may want to meet with some students in a small group who still need more support to find and retain suitable extracurricular activities. And then lastly, conduct the post-test with the groups, for all the students who met in large groups in the media center. Hopefully that makes sense. I just wanted to kind of lay out what a plan, kind of walking through the whole thing would be in terms of development of a comprehensive program and what that could look like. So this is the point where I'm open to any questions or comments that you might have. And sorry, you might hear my dog barking downstairs. He's a barker.
Right. Let's see. If you have any questions, please feel free to ask them using the questions section. Okay, question. Do you have any actual lessons you could share with us to promote this topic?
To promote the school engagement topic, which topic are you talking about?
It wasn't specified, so I'll wait and see if this individual wants to up full engagement.
I don't have any specific lessons, but I think that if you take a look at that survey that I can send out, it would be easy to kind of build around that survey based on the questions that they asked there. So this survey it's a valid and reliable assessment. So there are only a few questions there, and you could pretty easily develop some lessons based on that, or find lessons that are based on those specific questions. The school district that I'm working with, what they're actually doing is they're a very small school though, so I didn't want to go into too much detail about it because most of your districts are probably not as small as theirs is. But they are polling all of their students to find out who's not currently in an activity, and really that's only going to be around 30 kids. So they're going to actually meet with the kids one-on-one. But that's just not doable in a larger district for most people. I mean, I had a caseload of 450 students, and some of you may have a lot fewer than that. Some of you may have more. So I just wanted to give you the example of how that's being used in a local district around this area, but it may not work in your setting.
Okay, where do you find the psychological sense of school engagement?
I will send that out. I actually found a really great site where there's a lot of free assessment tools, and they look like they're legit ones. So I can send that over to Jen too, if she wouldn't mind. Jen, if you wouldn't mind emailing out that website that I found, and people can check out all the assessments that are there. There's some great ones around sense of belonging, but they actually have a lot of different assessments for middle school and high school, and even there was a few for elementary.
We actually just had somebody say that the 1993 survey is listed in the high school mindset conversation, or the high school conversation starters handout.
Oh, good. Yeah, we developed those a couple of years ago. I don't remember everything that's there.
Sure. All right, any other questions?
Oh, that's actually, I'm glad that somebody brought up those starter questions. We didn't include those today, but they're on the ASCA website. You can find, we did develop, because we wrote these, this was part of a grant for the Colorado Department of Education and adopted by ASCA and the Colorado Department of Education. But they wanted us to also do just sort of like a one-pager, easy lookup cheat sheet. So it doesn't, that starter question is much easier to read because it's less extensive. It doesn't have the information on it around parents and community members, but it might be something that you prefer using, and it has starter questions that connect to each of the mindsets and behaviors. So that can be found on the ASCA website. And it's a free resource, so you don't have to be a member.
Okay, we have somebody asking whether you'll be presenting at the National Career Development Association conference.
So no, I won't be. I wish I were going. Our budget's been cut, so I had to cut down my, I should. I had to cut down my travel this year, but I should. I'd like to, and I'm sorry I'll miss you if you're going to be there.
All right, I'm not seeing any other questions come in. All right, so do you have any, Megan, do you have any closing remarks while we give people the last couple of minutes to type in any questions and download the handouts if they'd still like to do that?
You know, I just want to thank everybody for attending, and please feel free to reach out to me if you have any follow-up questions or need anything. This is my email, mshay01@nyit.edu, and I'm happy to answer any kind of follow-up questions you might have.
All right, thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining us today. I believe Megan mentioned it, we have the last webinar in this series coming up on, I believe, January 18th. And that's going to involve engaging community partners. So please be sure to check that out if you're interested. We'll also be posting the recording of this webinar on our website, and it will be available to members only. So you will need to be a member in order to view the recording. All right, thank you everyone again for joining, and thanks Megan for the presentation. Have a great day.